Hello, beloved!
Welcome to the Sacred Sister podcast,
where we normalize the magic and sacralize the mundane. In this podcast, we open up dialogue on metaphysical subjects, self-healing tools, expanding consciousness, and deepening awareness.
We're here to support you in co-creating a life full of healing, meaning, and magic.
If you are brand new here, welcome and hello.
We're so excited to have you here.
If you want to know more about what's come before, Season 1 was great for building foundations on spiritual practices. Season 2, we focused on relationships, and now we're in Season 3.
The season of the Empress, where we open deep dialogue with conscious entrepreneurs who are spearheading their sacred mission.
We have an amazing lineup this season, so make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. Now a bit about us. I'm your host, Britt, a self-study entrepreneur, personal transformation coach, and content creator. I'm prompting you to come to know the self more fully, because when we can acknowledge who we are as unique individuals, our potential to experience life gets a whole lot more interesting.
And I'm your host, Hannah, a Life Beyond the Veil coach, astral priestess, and creator of the Moon Manifestors. And I guide you to connect to your intuitive powers and sync with life's algorithm to manifest their wildest dreams. Because, hey, we're multidimensional beings playing this game of life, so why not make it fun and magical?
We are so grateful that you're here. And together,
we're here to serve as your
Sacred Sister. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful, and welcome to Season 3 of Sacred Sister Podcast. Whether you're brand new here or if you've been journeying with us since Spring Equinox 2019, we are so excited. We're so blessed. We're so grateful for what has been unfolding on Sacred Sister Podcast. We cannot wait to get into the interview today. And before I introduce you to our guest, I really want to focus on opening dialogue with what energy is going to be circulating this season. So if we go back and look, Season 1 had the energy of the Magician. Season 2 had the energy of the High Priestess. And now we're in Season 3, the Empress. And by the way, we talk a lot about archetypes on this podcast, how relevant archetypal energies are to our being, to our world, how deeply embedded they are into our psyches, how much we actually do know and can recognize different archetypal energies. So that's a big reason why I want to open up on the Empress, just to normalize archetypes and normalize energy. And I really love the way numerologist.com depicts Empress energy, so I'm just going to read it. Whether or not you know anything about tarot, numerology, or the ancient archetypes of the sacred feminine, you're sure to recognize a woman who's embodying her inner Empress. You know that woman who draws the attention of everyone in the room with her deeply rooted self-confidence and her clear sense of self-worth and self-assuredness. Whether she's the CEO of a major company or a mother doing a school run, women who are at one with their inner Empress appear to be in full control of their lives, oozing effortless creativity and magnetizing abundance and good fortune, while others only seem to be chasing it. What a delicious energy, isn't it? Isn't that what so many of us are yearning to, or maybe we're just experiencing that we're stepping into this? Maybe it still feels like it's something that feels very, very, very far away. And all of that is completely fine. This is like what such a beautiful piece of the journey and evolution is all about. Because we're able to witness things in others, and when we can recognize the energy that they're flowing with, we don't have to be in competition with it because we see it and we can see that it's out there. And when we know that something is out there for somebody else, we can actually use what we could turn into competition into admiration. That's like the two ways that we can look at that energy. Either we can have like fits of envy and jealousy and see them as like having something that we can't have, or we can flip it around, view it from a positive, different perspective, not even necessarily positive, just not, my mom always used to say the word competitious, and I love it. So not as competitious, and, just realizing that admiration is actually a piece of ourselves that we are seeing from an embodied vantage point. Because when we admire someone, if we're able to acknowledge that the reason that we admire them is because they are shining something that we resonate with so deeply, but maybe we haven't allowed ourselves to experience it or express it or shine it or find our own authentic embodiment of it, like that's all it is. And a lot of times we haven't been able to embody that energy because other stuff, other stories, other programs, other thought systems, thought streams have been in the way of us experiencing that. And this is where we can get into our own self-study work. We can look at our ancestry. We can look at our line, our lineage, and how that energy is expressed and looked upon from the people that we grew with in the first years of our lives. Like, all of it stems back to some place that we're able to learn why it is that we haven't been able to embody something. And then with that awareness, we're able to work toward what it is that we do desire to experience in life. There's like a bridge that's created, and we can say like, okay, since she's reflecting or he's reflecting or they are reflecting something that resonates with me so deeply, can I utilize this? Can I find some medicine? Can I find some tool? Can I open dialogue about it? Can I normalize that this can be a reality for me as well? Because if someone else is able to embody something, we are for sure able to draw it into our reality as well. And finding the resonant, authentic, genuine path that is going to be just for us is going to be a part of our journey. That's going to be our thing. So another thing that I wanted to touch on with the archetype of the Empress is that the Empress stands for sovereignty, not rulership or dominion over others, but as an authority and a mastery over your own life. So I wanted to make that really clear distinction. The Empress stands for sovereignty. The Empress understands that she is governing, she is self-governing her own life, that she is the governor, she is the one that is making the decisions in her life. And, you know, this is a healthy thing. This is a good thing for all of us when we're able to shed the victim, shed the martyrdom, and realize that, you know, we're the sovereign being. We're the ones that are making the decisions, that are calling the shots. And if you aren't, then you can always utilize different tools, different healing modalities, different people that you can draw into your life in order to gain support and, work toward wherever it is that you're trying to go. I think the important thing is just realizing that that energy is out there. And if that energy is out there for anyone, it's out there for you. So in a nutshell, that is the Empress energy. And now I want to traverse over to our first guest of season 3 who embodies this energy so beautifully. Her name is Julie Parker. Julie is a priestess, speaker, author, life coach trainer, magazine editor, host of the Priestess podcast, and founder of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy. She runs a global training company that supports incredible people to become life coaches, and as a modern-day priestess, she's committed to supporting and inspiring people to activate their spiritual gifts and how to be in service to themselves, their communities, and the wider world. Her work is fueled by love, tea, and a desire to make sure that this one incredible life she's been given is put to full use. She is an absolutely magical woman. We are so grateful for the conversation that unfolded. We were left buzzing for the rest of the day after this podcast interview was done. And by the way, her book, Priestess, is coming out on July 1st, and it is available now for pre-order. Go and check it out. And without further ado, let's hop into Hannah's astrology segment.
So hello and welcome to this very first episode of the new season. My name is Hannah, and this is the very first astrology report that we're going to be doing in this Empress season, and I'm super excited. It is about Julie Parker, and she is a priestess, author, teacher, trainer, speaker, and she also has her own podcast. So we're going to look into her astrology and see how the archetypes are influencing her and how she has been embodying those inner blueprint energies. All right, so the first thing that I notice when I look into Julie Parker's chart is her beautiful Grand Fire Trine. Grand Fire Trine shows a wonderful talent and gift that we have that may sometimes take a little while for us to realize, because it is so natural for us. And after a while, we come to know ourselves on a deeper level, and that's when we can really access those gifts. So her Grand Fire Trine is between her Sun, Moon, and Neptune, all in fire signs. Her Sun is a Leo, her Moon Aries, and Neptune in Sagittarius. So the Sun being in the 8th house in Leo shows her passion for creation. She wants to create transformation for other people. She wants to be there and really experience life on a deeper level and have fun with it at the same time. So this explains also why she is such a talent in creating her own podcast and creating her own business. And interestingly enough, with the Sun in the 8th house, we have to go through some sort of dark night of the soul. Whenever we have a strong 8th house or Scorpio in our chart, that's when we have to go through some sort of really dark night, depressed state that then helps us to really access that gift on a deeper level. And she will tell us about her dark night of the soul in the interview. But with her Sun, and that kind of explains it too, because her Sun being in there together with her Mercury and Mars in the 8th house, it just kind of shows the importance of her to go into that deep rebirth and then realizing, okay, this is how I'm meant to shine in this world. This is truly what I want to share with others. And knowing this transformation helps her to access that Grand Fire Trine, which is in connection with her Moon in Aries. And Moon in Aries is the warrior. And her Moon in Aries is also in the 4th house. So she's really good at holding space for others, being there for others, nurturing others, but she does it in a warrior-like way. So she does it in a very inspiring and motivating way. She's not afraid to speak up on issues that are more taboo or that may have her stand out. She allows herself to fight for what is right and create space, hold space for others to heal their wounds so that they can become those spiritual leaders as well. And then, of course, the Neptune and Sagittarius in the 11th house for her connects both of the Sun and the Moon into this Grand Fire Trine, and Neptune and Sagittarius in the 11th house basically shows her connection, her intuitive connection to the collective consciousness, and just intuitively knowing what it is that we need to believe or that we are being guided so that we can create this new world, this new ideal world where we can heal on a deeper level, and we can really look into the light and the shadow and see both of them as a part of ourselves, and we can forgive ourselves for the past and truly shine our light. Another thing that I notice here is her Capricorn rising. And with the Capricorn rising, she is a businesswoman. Ultimately, she's a boss lady. So besides having all this like fiery energy within her, and fire stands for spirit and desire, is also very grounded, and she's able to bring in all this groundedness with her Saturn in the 6th house as well. She brings in this grounding energy into her rituals, into her everyday life, into her routines, so that she can use all these intuitive insights that she has, all these emotions and feelings that she's going throughout her life as a spiritual leader. She can take those and actually use them in her business and ground them down through her daily rituals. She also has a T-square between her Venus, Pluto, and Jupiter, and Pluto is conjunct her midheaven, and Pluto is that transformation that's happening for her. So she was really meant to transform her career completely, meant to shift her outlook of what she thought that she's going to be doing in her life. And it has something to do with Venus, which is her relationships, the partners that she chooses. And then she also has something to do with her Jupiter, which is the belief system. So there's a shift in her beliefs and a shift in her partnership that is helping her transformation towards her life direction. And she will be telling us more about that. So when we just look at the 3 archetypes of Julie Parker, with the Sun in Leo, the creator, the Moon in Aries, the warrior, and then Capricorn rising, the boss. So Julie Parker is a service-oriented boss lady who is dedicated to transform and help other people shine their light brighter while holding space for their wounds to be healed and confidently stepping into leadership as priestesses. It's beautiful to see how she embodies her archetypes so fully and confidently. And if you are looking to learn more about your own archetypes, I invite you to go to my website hannahchristensen.com and download the Archetype Playbook for free. You can just scroll down the page and you can find the 12 zodiac signs, and you can just download your sun, moon, and rising sign. And if you want to go deeper, there are several more resources on my website that help you to get to know your inner blueprint on a deeper level. And that being said, let's start with our interview, and Julie Parker will be guiding us on a beautiful prayer meditation. And so relax, sit back, and enjoy.
From the sun may we gather, may the moon dive me deep. Here I call in desires from my heart space I keep. See our spirits as one, I am you and you are me. We come into this space and share our sacred gifts. Oh, sacred sister, a kindred flame, may we light one another, from the ashes rise again. Oh, sacred sister, a kindred flame, may we light one another, from the ashes rise. Oh, we rise. Oh, again.
Great Mother and Universe, thank you for the gift of connection through sisterhood across the waves. We ask you to help and guide us, be an open channel and vessel for this conversation between sisters across the waves about leadership, love, liberation, and all the things that our heart is desiring and calling us to be in this moment. May we see each other, feel each other, and desire to be in service for each other through this conversation. We thank you for the gift of allowing us to be here.
And so it is.
So it is. Thank you so much, and welcome. Hello, Julie Parker, and hello, everyone that's listening here in this episode today. We are so blessed, so honored to be sitting with Julie Parker. She is the author of Divine Feminine Presence, Priestess, which we're going to be talking about. It's a brand new book that's being published like as we speak. Founder of the Priestess Temple School, the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, and the host of Priestess podcast. Welcome, Julie.
Oh, thank you so very much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation ahead and delighted to be here.
I was actually just listening to your podcast like less than half an hour ago, and we'll get into that later in the episode.
Okay.
It's been such a delight listening to all of your episodes too, and it's so much fun whenever we have people that host their own podcasts on this as well, because they're these brilliant communicators.
Well, it's something that I love to do. I mean, my goodness, and I can tell that it's the same for the two of you as well. You know, getting to have delicious, juicy conversations and the sharing of stories with other women is so healing, and something that really shifts and changes the world, I believe. So it really is an honor to be here.
Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you. And what we like to start out with is we're always so curious. How did it start for you? How did your journey start? How did you become the Julie Parker that you are now?
Well, I think that how we become someone and lean into ourselves as human beings, I'm not necessarily really sure, Hannah, to tell you the truth, that I think that it actually has a starting point. Because I think that one of the things that I've certainly learned and loved to learn on my priestess path and as a spiritual being, of which, of course, we all are, is the fact that I've been in co-creation with the universe for a long, long time before I've been in this physical body. And so where can one ever really say that one begins? I'm not sure. It's, obviously at birth, or maybe when I made a decision to step into becoming a social worker or a coach, or maybe it was when I went through a significant dark night of the soul in my early 30s and I experienced quite severe depression and had to do a lot of healing work. That was a real spiritual awakening for me, that experience. But really, my journey begins like it begins for all of us, through the cultural lineage and ancestral lineage of extraordinary men, and I think particularly women, because I adore them so much and work with them so deeply for so many years now. And it comes through in everything that I am and my values and, how I show up in life. And so I think we're constantly evolving. I'm really not sure where I began, all of the things. And in many ways, I find that really exciting, because it also helps me to know that any time that I wish to start over about anything, any time that I make a mistake, or that I need to be pulled up about something, or I need to be called in, or I need to do better by myself or by someone else, that I can choose to start again. I can choose to begin again, like we all can. And then that means that we can start over and say, well, that's where I really started, or that's where I really started. So I know that's probably not your typical answer to that question, but it's kind of what I'm feeling into at the moment.
Yes, I love it. I love your authenticity and your honesty and with this. And just, I can feel that deep connection that you have to source. And you've been talking a little bit about the darkness of the dark night of the soul, which is like a very common theme for a lot of spiritual leaders, that we kind of have to go through hell in order to experience heaven, or, we have to go through some sort of darkness where we have to face our shadows and fears and really come to grips with, who am I? What am I here to do? Can you tell us a little bit more about if you're open to that, a little bit more about your dark night and how you've worked through those fears and then stepped into leadership from that?
Yeah, well, that's a really big question. I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version as much as I can. Essentially, this experience began for me, in what felt like a very non-spiritual experience, I suppose. It wasn't that I just all of a sudden woke up one day like I know some people do and just wonder, who am I? Why am I here? I'm questioning my entire existence. Mine was a very tangible thing with the breakup of a relationship, long-term relationship that I believed was going to end in marriage and children. And when it ended, which was not at my instigation, basically I became quite literally heartbroken, and my whole world felt like it was crumbling around me. And in many ways, that is exactly what happened. You know, it did crumble around me, which is, let's face it, what happens when we go into the depths of our shadow. You know, the usual light that we see and experience in life gets dimmed down or turned out in some way, and we're forced to look at ourselves in a different way. And I became significantly depressed and unhappy, and this was coming from somebody that was usually very dimple-laden and smiley and positive and optimistic and all of those sorts of things. And it came as quite a significant shock to me that all of a sudden this was happening to me, and it came as a significant shock to my friends and family as well, who was like, wow, you know, gosh, this is so shocking. Would never have expected this to happen to you. I was also a therapist at the time. And so that added a layer of complication to this in many ways, because there I was trying to sit and help people through their own dark nights and emotional and psychological turmoil, and I was in the thick of my own. And I had to stop doing that for a while because I wasn't able to be in service to people. I needed to be in service to myself. And the experience of that and being diagnosed with clinical depression and having to go through that helped me essentially to see that I was not the sovereign, independent woman that I actually thought that I was. That I was beholden to this man, that I was beholden to love, that I was beholden to praise. I was beholden to having other people prop me up and tell me that I was okay. And so the illusion of myself, Hannah and Britt, was shattered. It was like, oh, here I am thinking I'm this strong, feminist, extraordinary woman with a great career. And in fact, I don't know who I am without this relationship. And that was really where the journey began for me, returning to my wholeness, returning to my independence, learning to live in, you know, at the age of 32, around what it meant to be alone, but fully with myself, which of course is a journey that we all must take, whether we are married, partnered, not in a relationship at any point in time. And it was sticky and messy, but it was also an extraordinary experience because it led me to find things such as meditation, wonderful self-help and spiritual teachers that opened up my heart and my eyes to new ways of thinking about myself. And so it was meant to be. And I had to step through all sorts of things for myself there. And I'm still doing that. And I think that if anyone, you know, I'm well now, and I have been well for a very long time, like more than 15 years. But this is constantly evolving for all of us, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, needing to check our ego, needing to, you know, step through fear, all of those sorts of things. I've now got a much, much better handle on it than I used to, but all of our stuff still flares at different times, and so I'm still a work in progress, as we all are.
Yes, I feel that so deeply, because even, you know, especially in this podcast too, we talk a lot about shadow work and the importance to not just focus on the light, but also feel into the shadows, because that's when we can literally transmute those shadows into the light, and we and shine our light more brighter in that sense. And I feel that so deeply, especially in business, and especially for women that are in business and entrepreneurs. The business world is so masculine, right? It's the light. It's like, stay positive, keep hustling, keep doing the things. And I see a lot of people getting stuck in that yang energy, in that masculine. I always need to stay positive and doing. And then when we're like so it happened to me myself as well. Like when we're so focused on that part and we always want to be happy, then it's almost like it has to come in the extreme opposite, where we get really, really shattered in some way or another. Something didn't happen the way we expected, so that we can really, really dive deep into the other side of the spectrum and bring in more of that darkness and shadow for us to feel more in balance between the two.
You're so right. And, I think that one of the things that we're finally waking up to as women is that way of functioning in both life and business doesn't work for us long term. It is simply unsustainable. We are cyclic creatures. We actually need to not only have, but celebrate and lean hard in a way, or soft, however you want to describe it, into things such as rest, into things such as reflection, into things such as ease and flow. Because if we don't do that, then eventually the push, the hustle, the on breaks us. And we know this to be true. We just know it. It is not a coincidence that there are so many women that are suffering from adrenal fatigue and, sleep problems and comparison to others around their productivity, their parenting, their, all sorts of things. And really, the revolution of rest and the revolution of ease and flow, it has started, but we have to celebrate each other for that and claim that time and that way of being for ourselves, because the patriarchy and the system is not going to give it to us. We have to take it back ourselves, because they're going to try and convince us constantly and ongoing, no, that's going to see you not get clients. If you're not in your feed every day, people will forget you, etc., etc. I could go on and on. I probably just climbed on a small soapbox there, but that's what's going to happen, and so we have to be resistance warriors there and take it back and say, no, I need this, we need this, let's honor it in ourselves.
Absolutely. Wow. I've been contemplating something that you said like minutes and minutes ago, and you just continue going on with this stream and this thread. I have to bring it back. A couple minutes ago, you were talking about just your dark night of the soul and how individual yours was. And this is a huge reason why we love asking these questions early on in the conversations with our guests, because so many of us have had this or are deep in the trenches at the time of the interview where we're trying to figure things out. And for us, it is such a potent piece of the conversation for us to give voice to, for us to open this platform to have these communications and these dark nights of the soul and pieces of our human experience being shared, because there's something so unique in the individualization of ourselves. And for myself, I see this podcast as being a beacon of light that shows people, the listeners, the audience, that everybody's path looks so different. And you mentioned, you hit it on the head when you talked about how much we can subconsciously compare ourselves to other people. And it's so important for us to be able to hold this golden seed so sacred that says wow, I am my own unique being, and my path, my difficulties, my challenges, my awakenings, my gifts, my talents, my abilities, my purpose. This is what we talked about on the Priestess podcast, is so individual for every single person. And it almost gives this ease, this ability to sigh a breath of relief that says it doesn't have to look any certain way. And I'm able to go with the flow with whatever it is and whatever I need. And I'm able to take those breaks. I'm able to distance myself from social media. And it doesn't just have to be people that operate their own spiritual businesses or coaches or these kinds of people. It's I feel like we're having a massive reckoning with social media right now, just like everybody, and how much it can take over our minds, take over our mental space.
Yes, it is an extraordinary thing in the modern world that we're living in, and I am so incredibly grateful for for it all. I mean, look at us sitting here right now, having a conversation with one another in 3 different parts of the world, and in the 2 different hemispheres as well. I mean, how extraordinary is that? And social media is and can be such a force and change for good. It truly, truly can. And so I throw no shade on it.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, the thing that we have to find with ourselves is our conscious way of relating to and using it. Because I understand when people say at different times, for example, I need to get off social media, either altogether or for X amount of time, okay? I understand when people say that. I'm having a social media detox, we sometimes hear people say that. I must admit that I come from the perspective, especially when you're a business owner, because for me as a business owner and an author and a creative and a podcast, social media is something that extraordinarily helps my business. It's a communication tool that allows me to connect with people that I otherwise would never be able to connect with. And so I come at it from the perspective of, and this is how I train, our coaches in the academy, to say, what is better for you really is to find a way that you can use it that feels ongoing, like you are in flow and rhythm, and that it feels juicy and good. So you never need to get to the point where you're throwing your phone down in a fit on the kitchen floor and saying, screw this, I'm over it. Instead, how can you be in this for the long haul? How can you use it juicily, ongoing all the time in such a way that you don't need to all of a sudden dramatically go, I'm out? Think about that instead, rather than it getting to the point where it breaks for you and you might break with it. And I think that that's a parallel to all of our lives. Like, how can we set ourselves up to live and operate our businesses in such a way that we can be juicy and easeful long term? So we're in service to the people that need us and allowing our gifts to come through, instead of breaking and running away from it or needing to have total time out from it. It's like, I think that should be one of our goals. It's like, how can I not shatter myself here? Because it is possible to do it.
Yes, totally. And I feel like part of it is also finding that connection to the flow, finding that connection to source within ourselves, and not so much trying to find it from other people. I think whenever we get caught up in trying to receive advice or insights or information from the outside world and trying to get that through social media, we can, again, we're in the masculine phase of like trying to get something from the outside instead of tuning into ourselves and, okay, what is my intuition telling me right now? What is my personal flow? Just as Britt was saying, what is my individual flow in business and in life? And so I want to ask you, because you are a priestess, so I want to ask you, how did that journey start for you? Was that already, a part of your spiritual beliefs in the first place, or did that happen through the dark night of the soul? Like, how did that whole journey come together?
Yeah, well, there's 2 parts to this answer, and it connects right back to the beautiful question that you asked me right at the very beginning, and that is that the sort of more easy and simple answer is that my path as a priestess began about 6 or 7 years ago now, from a conscious perspective. And interestingly, it was happening when I was interviewing a woman, just like you're interviewing me right now. And one of the questions I asked her was what had been one of the greatest teachers or teaching paths in her life. And she answered it for me and said a word that I'd never heard before.
I am calling in beautiful beings with a deep, burning, yearning desire to know themselves more fully, to feel fortified and faith-filled in the awareness that you came here with a purpose that only you can fulfill in your own unique way. For those who seek to cultivate their own resonant spiritual practices, I created the Sacred Self online course series just for you, to share intuitive tools that help one bloom from within. Doing deep self-study and introspection work has completely changed my life. I grew up in 18 different homes and 9 different schools across the Las Vegas Valley. I was intensely bullied and coped with moving a lot by morphing myself into whoever I thought other people wanted me to be. And it never, ever worked. I was anxious, a crippling perfectionist with a pretty severe identity crisis too. I know this isn't what your story is, but maybe some of you can see yourself in me. One of the most valuable things that I've learned in my 5 years of tireless, passionate self-study is that no one has the answers for me necessarily. That in order to transform, it's my job to prioritize the time that I need to sit with my gifts and my triggers, my stuff, myself. In the 3-part Sacred Self series, I guide you to create a sacred space for sitting in self-reflection. Invite in devotional gestures by creating a candle of presence, and gain self-awareness through self-study, utilizing Sacred Svadhyaya, a journaling practice. I had a client tell me recently, wow, I never really realized how much I glossed over the concept of self-acceptance. It's really like the most important thing. My sentiments exactly. When we can invite in the awareness that maybe, just maybe, our challenges have come as learning opportunities for us to grow wisdom and strength from, our lives begin to change, no matter the challenge, no matter the hardship. If this feels like a resonant step for you, I invite you to join me in the Sacred Self online course series. Use code SACREDSIS for 20% off when you purchase the 3-course bundle. Visit the online course tab on britlinlabeouf.com to enroll, and remember, you are the healer you've been looking for, but are you giving yourself the time and space to do those deep dives?
And she answered it for me and said a word that I'd never heard before, and that was the word priestess. And she said, the priestess path has been one of the greatest learnings and developments and teachings and divings into my soul that I have ever been a part of, and that's ever been a part of me. And I actually had a spiritual embodied reaction when she said that word. And I completely lost my place in the interview. And I actually mentioned that little story in the book and talk about that. I sent her a copy, of course, and said, thank you for being that awakening spark for me in that very moment. And I was suddenly I finished the interview and it went out and it was all beautiful and all of those sorts of things. This is a long time before the Priestess podcast. And I suddenly just found myself deeply interested in exploring everything about what that word was because of the reaction that I had had to it. And so I started down this research and exploration path. And the more that I went, the more that I became interested and pulled into it, and the more that I began to awaken and realize that I was one, and that I had just not known it, and that also I had come from a lineage of them, but that they had not necessarily known it either. And the path for me, therefore, has never stopped since that period of time, leaning into what I believe a modern priestess is, which is simply a reflection of what an ancient priestess is, because this is not new, and that is that she is a sacred spiritual leader, and in particular one who is a sacred spiritual leader that holds space to allow other women to see the divinity and the divine in themselves. And it's become one of my great life paths and passions. And, since then we've had the Priestess podcast and various other things, and it just infiltrates, every part of my life now and what I do. It always has, but I was just never conscious and aware of it. I think back to times when I was a little girl growing up on a farm and my nana telling me stories about different goddesses in the orchard and I remember stories of her telling me about the Roman goddess Pomona. Let's say a little prayer to Pomona for these apples. The French word for apple is pomme. And you don't realise these things as a little girl. Or she would talk about Mother Earth and so many different things. And and you don't necessarily have these connections or awakenings until you're much older. And she was also a Christian. And she believed in God. But there were many, many more stories in my house, I think, with a strong line of women that I came from about Mary, Mother Mary, and Mary Magdalene as well, because we weren't hearing that in Sunday school. Mary Magdalene was a repentant prostitute.
Yeah.
And all sorts of trouble. Don't be like Mary. You got to be like Mother Mary. You can be like Mother Mary, virginal and good, but don't be like Mary Magdalene. And now it's all flipped. It's like, yeah, Mary Magdalene, let's be Mary Magdalene. Of course we need to be ourselves, but, you piece these parts of your life together so often, not when you're a child, but when you're an adult and you awaken to these things. So, yeah. That's it.
Beautiful. And I love how you just mentioned Mary Magdalene, because that's actually a little story that I wanted to share, because when I started my priestess training with the Sophia Goddess Center, I told my parents, who were both Catholic, and I'm that kind of child in my family. My purpose is to really awaken them to see another perspective, and so that was one of those moments where they really had to sit with themselves and be like, "What are you gonna do, priestess?" And my dad was actually the one who said, "Well, you know what a priestess is, right?" I said, "Well, I know what a priestess is, but what do you think it is?" And he said, "A priestess is the prostitute of a priest."
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, that was my reaction too. I'm like, oh, wow, where does that come from?
I was going to say, I had never heard that version. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I think it comes from that specific Mary Magdalene story that you were just telling us. Mary Magdalene was a priestess. And instead of seeing her as a priestess and acknowledging her and respecting her as one, the Catholic Church changed her into a prostitute. And it was these ancient belief systems that we can have that are attached to certain words when we hear them, and feel like, okay, this needs to be changed. There's so many words in this world that have like a negative connotation attached to them. And we just talked about that actually in our last episode about the word witch, which has also a very negative connotation to it. And the word priestess has kind of like, not as negative as a witch, but it feels like there is still something there where it triggers people. Have you noticed that as well?
Absolutely. And a lot of it just simply stems from ignorance, because, what was told to you there is actually just factually incorrect. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know we're all entitled to have an opinion, but to a certain extent only if it's actually an opinion and it's not the opposite of a fact, which is a mistruth. Because priestesses have in fact been around for thousands of years, and indeed a long, long time before we what now know is a priest. Before there was Christian homogenization and the worship of one God, or, there are a number of different religions that just focus on one male God. There were, in fact, throughout ancient cultures throughout the world, so many different religions and spiritual beliefs that believed in many different gods and goddesses, including, of course, the greatest one of all, our great mother, Mother Earth. And there wasn't one for everything. If you were having problems of the heart, you called on the goddess of love. If you wanted to get pregnant, you called on the goddess of fertility. If you were going into battle, you called in the god of war and the goddesses of war as well, and courage and faith, and to pull you through fear, to work with that. And priestesses were channels and vessels of the divine, for these beings, for the everyday person in their community. When women sat in circle and worshipped and gathered food and weaved and raised children together, before we were all separated into nuclear families and households in houses that all look the same, but we don't know what the inside of them looks like because we don't talk and connect and communicate with each other in the way that we once did. And so, yes, there are negative connotations that for some that are attached to the word priestess because the patriarchy ripped it from us. And when that began to spread, and patriarchy and religious homogenization are deeply interconnected with each other, when that began to happen, any woman that was a spiritual leader in any, or a community leader, or healer or guide or witch, in any way, shape or form, was suppressed. Yeah. And, I'm sure your listeners don't need me to tell how that happened. We just know that it did happen. It's part of history, and part of herstory as well. And that's where that happened, and things got twisted and very changed. But once upon a time, priestesses were some of, if not the most significant political, social, economic warriors and leaders of the world. And I believe that we're here to reclaim that at this time, and seeing the stepping up of that happening now is what makes me a little bit emotional, actually, I think is the great calling of our time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Wow. I'm having such a beautiful moment of reckoning myself, because actually just last night I was looking over this document. Usually we write up some questions for our guests, and Hannah had written this about sharing this story with her father. And I was like, I hadn't really heard that view of the priestess either. And I wrote her and I was like, I don't know, do you feel like this is relevant? Because I haven't heard of this, and I was looking online, I hadn't really seen it, but I feel like this is such a blessing for us to be able to just share stories and perceptions, and even the perceptions of the people that are around us, and for us to be opening dialogue on stuff like this, so that we can see how vastly different people's opinions and stories are, what their personal truths are. And it really gives us this beautiful reflection to discern and start to look at our own stories and discern what our personal truths are, and realizing how much we apply our personal truths and project them as ultimate truths in so many different areas of life. So I'm super grateful that this whole conversation just happened, because last night I was like, ooh, do we want to do this? Do we want to go there? And I'm so grateful that it totally organically unfolded.
Well, I'm glad for that too, because my goodness, you speak just such, the irony of saying this in so many ways, but you speak such truth there, Britt, around the fact that, one of the things that the patriarchy and white supremacy and other, systemic oppressive systems foist upon us is this binaried way of being, thinking, speaking, all of those sorts of things. And it's just, there is no one universal truth. We all must discern and interpret in life what is best and right for us. And hopefully when we do that, which then becomes the compass for our morals and values and who we are as a human being, I think one of the greatest callings from that point in time is to then find others that align with your truth and journey together, particularly for women, I think, because again, once upon a time, we were so deeply in community and connection and sisterhood with each other, and that was deliberately broken and taken from us. And So many of us are now carrying significant sister wounds, struggling with comparison with other women, struggling with competing, in a world and society that has set us up to do that. It's not our fault. We've been taught to do it. We've been set up to do it. We've been pushed into doing it in so many different ways. But while it's not our fault, it is our responsibility to take it back. It is our responsibility to reclaim it. It is our responsibility to mend and heal these wounds and come back together, so that when we're journeying through life, finding our truth, living our truth, we do so with other sisters by our side and amplify the power of what that means.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. And I just want to go back to what you were saying when you talked about the priestessing and how we were channeling these different gods and goddesses. And so I'm wondering, how do you use that in your business now, in your everyday life? How do you use that connection to source, the connection to different divine beings? Or what do they even mean to you? Are these just their like energy archetypes, or are these actually beings,
Yeah, no, they definitely are beings for me. There is no doubt about that. But I know that there are particular priestesses, just as in ancient times, who are very devoted, to, for example, to Sophia, the Gnostic goddess Sophia, or that particular energy, and others, because of their culture, may be particularly connected to the Hindu goddesses, or others. For me, I must admit that my personal sacred practice has just guided and led me towards different beings of source that have helped me on my journey, and they've varied over time. When I first started out on my priestess path, for example, I was very connected with the goddesses of love, in particular Aphrodite, Venus, Freya. And I learned that the reason for that for me was because I really had some healing to do around my own body and my own body image and self-love. Mm-hmm. And those goddesses in particular are very powerful in that area. And they helped me to feel, more luscious and loving towards myself. And they felt very beautiful. And I think that that's often what can happen with people if they first start wanting, or women I should say in particular, if you first start wanting to connect with the goddess. What will come is often a beautiful, easeful, graceful reflection of what you need. But I have a little bit of a theory, and that is that the deeper that you go in with her, with a capital H, and whomever she is to you, she'll take you dark. She'll treat you really beautifully and kind at the beginning, but then once you've got your self-love dialed up a little bit more, she'll then go, okay, now the real work begins. Mm. Like we've played in the shine, we've played it in the light. You're now feeling really hot about yourself, and things are really good. And now I'm going to leave you, and I'm going to allow my dark sisters to step in. And that's exactly what happened to me. Suddenly, when I was trying to connect with these goddesses at my altar every day, I began to feel disconnected, and it wasn't happening. And I started to have dreams at night with this dark, shadowy figure. And I could go into that in more detail. But the short version was that I finally realised I couldn't resist thinking about or facing what that was anymore. And really it was the dark goddess that was calling me. I think at different times she took on the form of Ceridwen, the great dark Welsh witch goddess. And that's a part of my Celtic lineage and line. And that was when I started to have to do some much more deeper work around sovereignty and independence and leadership and how I was showing up in the world. And so I journeyed with her for a while. I've also journeyed with Mary Magdalene. She was a very significant part of my journey for a couple of years, particularly when I was doing a lot of earth-based work. I went on a solo quest for 3 days and 3 nights here in the Australian bush, just with water and a tent and a blanket. And that was a very profound experience. And she was with me the entire time. And I'm so grateful to her for that. And I consider her to be such a patriarchy survivor, resistor, just an inspiration, really, in so many different ways. And so I guess what I'm saying and sharing there is that different beings and goddesses seem to come to me at different times. I've also had, just different plant medicine as guides at different times and varying, and I just feel into whatever I need and whomever comes to me naturally and organically in any moment. Interestingly enough, at the moment, I'm exploring a little bit more into the world of Celtic fairies and the fae folk. They're coming up a little bit for me. I was always very resistant to like the Tinkerbell pink fairies. I was like, oh no, this feels so Disney. But they are fascinating. And for some reason, they are circling around me a little bit. And I think that might have to do with the fact that last year I went on an ancestral pilgrimage through my line to England and Scotland and Ireland. And since then, they've kind of been flitting around and flirting with me. I need to spend a little bit more time with them.
I love that. As soon as I had my daughter too, and she started to really love fairies and Tinkerbell and everything, she's a fairy princess. And that was also for me the time where I started to opening myself up to the fairies. And before I was the same way. I was like, no way. But, it's so interesting that we talk about this because Britt and I actually, sending back and forth articles currently because we're just so intrigued by this when we talk about New Age to Jesus. And this is not even something that we wanted to mention necessarily for this episode, but I feel like I just wanted to throw it in for a moment because it is so interesting because a lot of them went through something similar as you would describe it, in a sense that suddenly they didn't feel connected anymore. Suddenly they did see shadows. Suddenly they had to face their fears and their, levels of independence. And it seems like it's like then we have a choice. It's like we have a choice of what do we do with this now? Mm-hmm. How do we handle this now? Where are we going next? And what would you say, how do you know that the being that you connect with is good to you?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Well, for me, it seems like such a simplistic answer, but I think it's very, very true. And that is that it simply feels either good or necessary. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say, because when the dark goddess energy started to come to me, it didn't feel good at all. I was having nightmares. She was disturbing my sleep. She's coming to me in my subconscious and waking me, in the middle of the night in a little bit of a sweat. And that didn't necessarily feel good, but I also didn't necessarily feel unsafe and just needed to work through it. And eventually when I stopped resisting it, and what happened was that I completely cleared my altar of all of the lovely, luscious pink and Aphrodite and all that sort of stuff. And I just put one small candle on it and said, okay, let's dance. Come, I'm making space for you. I'm making a space for you. Come out of the dark, dark shadow in the middle of the night for me and talk to me. What do you need to say? So, in other words, I was just asking me to talk to me because that's all that we do when we connect with a goddess energy or any other type of energy, is that we connect with ourselves, we talk to ourselves. Anytime the goddess speaks to you, you're speaking to you. That's what's happening there. And so I just needed to make space for that to actually happen. I wasn't making space for it before. And when I did, that's how it came through. That's how she came through. That's how that part of me came through. So it might not necessarily always feel good, but it will feel necessary. Or one of the things that we know as well, and I think this is very, very true, or at least it is of my experience and what I know of many other women, is that she will not go away. That part of you will not go away. It will keep coming back again and again and again. And it will show itself, or she will show herself to you in different ways again and again and again. And therefore, even if you don't want to look at that part of you, with her help or on your own or however you want to do it, it'll just keep coming back until you do. And so may as well go there as soon as you can.
Are you ready to connect deeper with your intuitive powers, feel confident in your decision making, and manifest your dream life and business with less stress and more flow? If you are a heck yes, I got something for you. The Moon Manifestor membership. Learn the algorithm of life. Find out what portals of opportunity are opening up for you each month, so you no longer have to second guess yourself and try to force things to happen, but you can playfully up-level your life while enjoying the journey. And just like Pamela, one of the Moon Manifestors, who says, "The Moon Manifestors have influenced my life in every way. Honestly, my life has become so much less stressful and so much more in the flow. I love seeing amazing things manifest for each of us." So what are you waiting for? Join the Moon Manifestors and transform your life in a fun and magical way. For only $39 per month, it's like your spiritual gym membership. So go to hannahchristiansen.com and sign up for the Moon Manifestors. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you there. May you live your dream life with less stress and more flow, because you are worth it.
It'll just keep coming back until you do. And so may as well go there as soon as you can.
Wow, such a sacred door that you're opening, just inviting others to come into. It's just so important. It's so beautiful. I've just been everything that you have today. This is such potent, juicy info. So
it's my pleasure.
Okay. Perfect. Good. It is our pleasure to be sitting with you. So I wanted to talk about something that I heard on not this most recent episode of your podcast, but the one before. Congratulations, by the way, on 150 episodes. That is remarkable. And I was listening to these favorite episodes that you were sharing, or not necessarily favorite. You did clarify at the beginning, but these deeply, deeply potent episodes for you. And I'm very excited to have a lot to go and listen to in the coming days. But you said something that I really wanted to touch on. And as someone who does a lot of self-study work, and I work with other people to come to know themselves more fully as well, you mentioned these 3 episodes that I wondered if you would just open up on the significance of them. And it was healing the mother wound, healing the father wound. You touched on healing the sister wound earlier in this episode, and also coming to know your ancestors, which you've touched on as well. So this is something that I've always felt very, very, very called to, some of the deep grounding work as someone who comes from a identity crisis sort of past. And in different chapters of my own studies, I've encountered women who have talked about how the grounding aspects, or like the self-reflective aspects of spirituality or spiritual practice, aren't always seen as the most spiritual, or like as important as some of like the higher, more cosmic knowledge, or connecting with your spirit guides and things like the grounding work. And I wanted to know if you would just open up on some of the significance in that, because it resonates with me so deeply.
Well, I love you for that, Britt, for saying that, because this can be one of the issues, if I may say so, and of course this is just simply my opinion, but it can be one of the issues or dark areas, if we're not careful, of the feminine and of the divine feminine. And that is that it's very easy for us all to float up to the heavens and be ethereal and connect with the beautiful goddesses and don our flower crowns and pretty dresses and robes, and away we float. But that's not real life. And it's not grounding, and it doesn't help us with the reality of everyday lived existence, where we are all traversing and living in a world, no matter how we identify, with so many soul-crushing experiences, oppressions, and more. And so we have to be grounded. We have to root in. We have to be real. Otherwise, this is where spiritual bypassing and gaslighting and so many other things just takes such deep root. And I'm going to say it, it's white women that are the card-carrying members of that on the whole. Because I'm a white identifying woman, we can do that because society is set up to support us and sustain us in a way that allows us to do so. Black women, brown women, Indigenous women, other women of colour and people of colour in general can't do that. They don't have the capacity to do that. And so anything that helps any of us be more grounded into the reality of life and the earth that we walk on is absolutely necessary and required. And one of the ways that I have learned through so many teachers and people that we do that is to get in touch with our own culture, our own ancestry, and our own lineage, the roots of who we are and where we come from, and to at least be open to that and interested in it and explore it. Because when we do, we're much, much less likely to culturally appropriate. We're much, much less likely to bypass the reality of what it means to come from colonisers and deny that or push that away if we are white and we're living in the Western world, but instead face the reality of that and go, this is who I am, this is who I come from, and I am going to be a part of the healing of that. I'm going to be a part of doing something that contributes to reparations in relation to that, rather than push it aside and go, well, I didn't do it. It's like, of course you didn't do it, but you benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And your children benefit from it, and all the future of your children benefit from it too. And so that's just one example of what it means as to why it's so important to ground in, you know. And so ancestral work, cultural work, where we come from, and it's not necessarily about tracing your family tree, although that's a fascinating, wonderful, interesting thing to do. That can be one part of it. But just more deeply connecting in with who you are and the reality of your everyday life. Yes, our higher guides and spirits and beings are beautiful, and they are a deep and beautiful reflection of ourselves. But so is the bones underneath us. So are the stories and lineages of all those who came before us, both in our blood and how we impacted others as well. So the more we can root and ground in there, the more we're going to see each other as human beings, because we see ourselves and we accept ourselves for all our failings, all our mess, all our misgivings, and all of our love and brightness as well. We see ourselves as whole. We accept ourselves as whole and messy and loving and beautiful and dark and desperately in need in so many different ways. And when we see each other in our complexities like that, that's when we collectively rise and heal together.
So powerful, such powerful words that you're speaking there. Thank you. I feel like that is especially during these times. This is such a needed message. And I always feel like whenever I do ancestral healing, or, you know, really connecting with the mother wounds and through the generations, and just recognizing what my mom went through, what her mom went through, what her mom through, and on the same side of my dad as well, I just feel my ancestors behind me, almost like cheering. It's like they're cheering for us, being like, yes, like they want us to break that cycle. They want us to break the pattern and be like, I'm not going to just continue with the same pattern and the same wounding that my parents experienced. Just because I experienced that, I don't have to give that to my own children or to my people, to my, you know, my surroundings. And such a powerful work to do. And I love that we touched on that. And I would like to ask you now, coming from that point where we say we want to take all this, the priestess path and the sacred leadership and really put that into practical steps on how can we take all of that and put that into our own life or into our business. What would you say is like for someone that says, I'm ready to step into sacred leadership, I'm ready to dive into this path of the priestess? What would you say are the next steps to take?
My answer might be about to surprise everyone, and it might not necessarily be the answer that people want to hear. But then again, maybe if they've been listening deeply to what we've been talking about, it might not necessarily come as that much of a surprise, because probably what someone would expect me to say is that, like, oh, well, connect with a high priestess and begin your training, begin your apprenticeship, begin looking into this, but it's actually not about that at all. The path of the priestess, firstly and foremostly, begins with self-healing. Because you cannot be a beautiful vessel for the divine and for other women to see their own beauty and divinity and spiritual self if you are not actively, consciously and deeply working on all of the wounds and healing that you need to address. That is where you must begin. It is a path that requires you to look at everything where you keep yourself small, you're beholden to fear, you are not sovereign, you are reliant upon others, you are self-hurting yourself in different ways, and looking at all of the shadow aspects of yourself and your life that you know that you need to address, even if you try to conveniently push them aside. And that's where it begins, and that's where the middle is, and that's where the end is as well. But that's how you start. If you want to become a magnificent, sacred spiritual leader, you begin with looking at you first. You don't enroll in a course and you don't start some sort of path of spiritual study until you actually really, really commit to looking at these things. And you don't do it alone, of course. You may need a guide, a coach, books, a sacred circle, ongoing, where you get to express yourself and share with other women in so many different ways. And it's work for life. I'm on it and doing it too, but that's where it starts. And that's exactly what happened to me when that dark goddess came. I thought my path really began when, with Aphrodite and Venus and all the self-love stuff. And sure, it did on some level, but it didn't really start until that time when it was like, okay, you've got some work to do here. You're a coach and you're a podcast host and you're doing this and all that sort of stuff, but there's some stuff here that you're not looking at. You want to really, really do this, you need to go there first. That's the first step.
Yes. So powerful. I love it. It's funny, the synchronicities too, because I just said that to my client on the call just yesterday, exactly that, because she was saying, I want to shine more in community. I want to be more out there and helping other people more. But at the same time, she was so hard on herself because she wanted to force herself out there and be more successful and put more good content out and share more and be more of service. But then when we're so hard on ourselves and we forget that self-love and we forget to look at our own shadows first, we cannot shine that light outwardly.
That's right. Yep, exactly.
I really love how we really haven't shied away from a lot of the harder things to sort of talk about, these very ego confronting pieces that all of us go through. All of us go through if we really give ourselves the time and space to address the little triggers and things that are circulating inside of us. And this is, once again, another big reason that we love just getting so vulnerable on this podcast, if not for any other reason than to be letting our other sisters and beautiful beings that are listening to this podcast know that you're not alone. You're not alone in a lot of the crazy stuff that's going on in your life. And the more vulnerable communicators that we can be in letting our audience know that yeah, man, this stuff's crazy and it's not what everyone's choosing. And we totally acknowledge that. And who's to say what other people's path is in this life? But if you are feeling a call, and if you are feeling that you desire some deeper meaning or deeper purpose or deeper connection in this life, that, you know, these things are here for us to tap into. The guides are here. The teachers are also here. The sisters are here. That's something I wanted to touch on earlier, that you were talking about calling in sisterhood and the sister wound. This is something that, oh my gosh, all the way from childhood, I was dealing with this hardcore. And I know that Hannah has a past with this too. I'm sure so many of us do. Is this almost this telling of ourselves, this weaving of a lie, this weaving of a story. Whenever a lot of us start stepping into awakening our spiritual body, is that we just don't fit in with people anymore, and that no one's interested in the stuff that we're getting interested in, and we just don't have friends, and that it's hard to make friends when you're older, and that it's hard to connect with people. And I just want to say, for anyone that's listening to this right now who may be feeling in a similar place, or maybe you are thirsting, like it feels like it could be so far away for you to have someone who's deeply devoted to this work and also able to like hold you and hold hands with you on this journey. Just know that they're out there. They're out there. They're waiting for you just the same, and calling in these sisters will help the universe, God and Goddess, to place these opportunities in your path for you to take action and go out and be meeting them as well.
And so it shall be. And so it shall be.
Yes, thank you. It was important for me to touch on that, and I'm happy that I went back to it. That was a long time ago.
No. And so it shall be, because it's a story. If there is anyone out there, is any beautiful woman that is listening to this right now that says, I can't make female friends, I can't hold on to sisters in my life, it's a story. It may have been your story up until now, whether real or constructed, but it doesn't have to be your story moving forward. It doesn't have to be. You can change it and shift it. And you can.
Yeah. I love that you said that earlier about choosing again. The first time I heard that, choose again, from Gabrielle Bernstein, I was like, it was this massive dawning on me. I was like, oh my gosh, I can.
Yeah, change the story. Change it. You know, plot twists, happen all the time in books and stories. It's not, the story that someone has at the start is not the story that they have at the end. Why do we see ourselves as so one-dimensional when we are not? Change the story. Choose again. Pick a different route. You can. You absolutely can, for sure.
Would you say that I know that a lot of us have our stories, and unpacking those stories and looking at the baggage is like a whole feat unto itself. But would you say that sometimes we just make things entirely too complicated for ourselves, and we can overcomplicate and make things as complex as we want to, but we can also literally just have like an energy shift in 5 minutes?
We're so nutty. Yes, with that. You are 100% correct. We twist ourselves. We overcomplicate things. We get ourselves all tied up in so many different ways. And yes, I'm a trained therapist, for goodness sake. I'm not going to sit here for a moment and say that it is not a good thing to do to unpack some stuff sometimes. But sometimes also just need to make a decision to choose something else. Yeah. And that you don't need to overanalyze it. You actually just need to go, do you know what? I don't like that anymore about myself. I am going to choose to be different. And that is not bypassing. It is not making things simple when they are not. That's not what that's about at all. Sometimes it's action. Sometimes we need to lean into our masculine and a rod in our back strongly and significantly and just do it. Really, we do. and that's why, God, we love the masculine so very, very much. Otherwise, we wouldn't get any shit done. Like, we just would be floating around all the time. And it was just, and that's lovely, and the flow and the ease, and but sometimes just choose, just do it, really. And you can, and we can, and sometimes that's where we need to go.
Thank you for touching on that. I love that you just put that in as well, because it seems like from some people on the outside looking into quote unquote spiritual people or quote unquote spiritual practices, there can be this, polar opposite narrative that they have going on, that we inside of this realm just float around all day long, and that it's not actually this alchemization and like invitation of the balance, and this really big focus on consciousness to balance these energies within ourselves, and that it's not just the feminine, and it's not just floating around all day.
Absolutely not. Gotta get stuff done. Yeah.
And I actually believe that the feminine, the true power of the feminine is the unity, whereas the power of the masculine is the individuality. So the power of the feminine is bringing both together. So the more that we go into the feminine, we actually want to bring in the masculine as well with the balance.
Yes.
Because as soon as we just say, oh, I'm just going to go into the feminine and I'm going to let go of the masculine, detach from it, maybe even hate on it, what happens in a lot of ways, what I've experienced with other priestesses, of starting to like really bash down on the divine masculine as well, just from what the pain and the hurt that we've been through as women. It's so easy to get caught up in that. But then realizing, wow, that the feminine is bringing both of those together, and seeing that balance and unity, and how can we live in, like, how can we dance together? How can those energies like balance each other's out and be in flow, but with each other?
Such a beautiful question, and such a beautiful sharing, Hannah. It's 100% true. And once again, it's so ironic in many ways, because it's such a masculine binary way of thinking. I'll go all this way.
Yes.
Even if all that way is into the feminine, it's like, well, hang on a second, that's actually quite a masculine way of thinking about it. It's like, where is the flow here, the gentleness? Where is the coming together? Where is the, all of that sort of stuff? So yes, it's like, life is a constant path of discernment, isn't it? Constant of needing to choose and feel into what's right for us. So yeah, always.
What a gift too, right? What a gift to have discovered so much complexity, so much nuance, and so much dimensionality within this world that also can be taken so literally and so like binarily.
Exactly. Free will. Wow. What a revelation, to choose what's right, for us.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sitting with us. And that was such a juicy conversation. I love how we went into the light and the shadow of it all. So we have like a few questions that we give our guests in every episode. Do we want to dive into those now, Britt?
Yes, let's go ahead and start the questions. And these ones you don't have to answer as in-depth. You can have them in a little truncated version, just whatever it is to you. What does sacred mean to you?
Life.
Beautiful. Who is a sacred sister to you?
Ooh, my sacred sister in life is Sora Suyuno, who is the co-founder of Priestess Temple School with me. We are two women who come from completely different cultural backgrounds and worlds, but we are both quite certain that we have journeyed together over many lifetimes.
Oh, beautiful. What does it mean for you to have that sacred sister?
Oh, absolutely everything. It means joy. It means connection. It means fun. It means being seen and being held.
Mm-hmm. And what are 3 ways that you make something normal or mundane into something magical or sacred?
Ooh, ritual, intention and prayer. All of those things together, to me, can make the most difficult moment ease, or the seemingly most mundane so much more rich and beautiful.
Oh, Miss Julie Parker, thank you so much for sitting with us today. I've been pretty much grinning ear to ear. I need to give myself a facial after a facial massage to ease my muscles. We want to thank you so much for sitting with us. This has been such a juicy, potent conversation, and what a beautiful entrance into season 3, The Empress, where we're looking at the ways that we can spearhead our sacred missions and open these sacred leadership portals to so many people that are awakening to this other way of living life, this other way of showing up.
Thank you so very much for having me. I've absolutely loved this conversation and hope that it finds its way into deep service into the hearts of whomever may be listening.
Thank you.
It is.
And so it is. And thank you to all our listeners. May you all have a blessed day.
And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.